I'm Harrison Graham, and on today's episode of Chicago Bears Now, we're going to tell you how Ryan Poles and the Bears can create up to well over $100 million in cap space if they choose to do so. They already have a lot of money to spend, but they can create even more, so we'll walk you through those steps. Before we get to that, though, share this video on social media. All you got to do is click the share icon, and then you can share it to Twitter, X, whatever you're calling it these days, Facebook. You can text it to your buddies, spread it all over as we are trying to get more Bears fans to watch this episode and to watch this channel. Okay, let's take a look at the Bears salary cap outlook as we are less than a month away from NFL free agency. They currently have roughly $63 million in projected cap space. The NFL has not yet announced what the cap figure is going to be this year, but most expect it to be about $275 million. As of now, the Bears already have the sixth most space in the NFL, so they're in a good position. It's one thing Ryan Poles has done very well since taking this job is to get the Bears in a good cap standing and remain in good standing on a year-to-year basis. But let's be clear. If the Bears want to create even more space, they can absolutely do that. They have four different avenues in terms of kind of categorical avenues that they can take to create more cap space, and we will go through those here on today's show. Number one, they can restructure some contracts. Pretty much every player can be restructured, but let's focus on the five that could create an additional $5+ million in cap space this upcoming year. You look at these five players: Montez Sweat, DJ Moore, Jaylon Johnson, Tremaine Edmunds, Cole Kmet. Some of the bigger cap hits on the team. If they restructure them, they can create the following numbers. If you restructure Montez Sweat, that's an additional $13.2 million in cap space with the snap of a finger. Same with DJ Moore, $15.7 million in savings. $9.9 for Jaylon Johnson, $6.9 for Tremaine Edmunds, an additional $5.9 for Cole Kmet. If you restructured all five of those players, right there, that's $51.6 more million in cap space. Quick math on top of 63. You're over $110 million. Now, let's be clear. There is a balance to be had because if you restructure contracts for players, it increases their cap hits in future years. So just for example, a player like Tremaine Edmunds, next year you can cut him pretty easily without much dead cap penalty. If you restructure him, that doesn't become as feasible. So you got to pick and choose your battles. Like, okay, if you're going to restructure a guy, that means that's a player that's for sure in your plans next year as well. So let's kind of look at these five guys, right? I would restructure Montez Sweat and Jaylon Johnson. I expect them both to be on the team in 2026. Now, I also expect DJ Moore and Cole Kmet to be on the team, but DJ kind of had a weird year last year. I don't think his cap hit is too unmanageable. Let's just play this year out. You don't need to restructure everybody. You want to stay healthy right now and in the future salary cap wise. I don't want to restructure Edmunds because he's been disappointing. Let's just eat the $17 million cap hit this year, and if he disappoints again, you can cut him with minimal penalty. And then Cole Kmet's cap hit's only $11.6 million. You don't need to restructure to save $5 million. It's just not necessary. So while I fully expect him back next year as well, again, you don't need to restructure just to restructure. But I think Sweat and Jaylon, if you restructure those two players, I am 100% confident will be back next year and have pretty big cap hits. All of a sudden, you're up to $86.2 million roughly in projected cap space. You could do DJ as well, and again, I expect him to be here, but pick and choose. You don't want to restructure everybody because then next offseason, if you're looking to spend, well, you've got less money to work with because those cap hits are higher for those players. Okay, drop a name in the comments. Who will be the Bears' best player this season? You look at those five players, highest paid cap hits. You hope it's Caleb Williams. I mean, if your quarterback's your best player, you're in a good spot. But if you had to predict it right now, who will be the Bears' best player in 2025? Go ahead and drop his name. Okay, number two, roster cuts. This is the most common avenue for teams to create cap space and manage their roster, ahead of free agency, etc. To me, there's four guys to keep an eye on that can save notable money. Obviously, there's lesser names that will get cut, but you're not talking about more than $2 million in a lot of those players' cases. Kevin Byard would save you $7 million if you cut him. Gerald Everett saves you $5.5 million. DeMarcus Walker, $5.3 million. Ryan Bates, $4 million. I would keep Kevin Byard and DeMarcus Walker. Walker's a hell of a rotation player. He's a rah-rah guy for this team. His cap hit's right around $6 million. It's just not that big of a cap hit for you, and your D-line's not that deep. And Kevin Byard, while his $8.5 million cap hit is probably a little pricey for him at this point in his career, with Jaquan Brisker's injury situation, I don't see how you can cut Byard because you might have to then sign 2 safeties. So I'm cutting Gerald Everett, who was a major disappointment, and Ryan Bates to save $9.5 million because neither is a starter. I would not expect either, especially obviously Everett wouldn't be a starter, but I don't see a scenario where Ryan Bates is a starter. I've mentioned before you could cut Bates because his cap hits $4 million, and in his case you save all $4 million. Maybe he comes back on a vet minimum deal to be a backup. I'd be open to that, but $4 million for a guy who I don't think can afford to start coming off his shoulder injury season and concussion issues last year. I think he's got to get cut. And Gerald Everett, one of the biggest disappointing signings, and maybe in all of free agency last year, did absolutely nothing. So that saves you almost $10 million. And lo and behold, with the moves I've chosen to make, I'm up to $95.7 million. And again, if you did every move that I would have suggested so far, you'd probably be, $125 million. So there is a lot of money to be created in cap space if the Bears choose to do so. Okay, 2 more avenues to get to in just a moment, but get your FGB t-shirts right now. Finally beat the Packers. We're hoping to carry that momentum into 2025. Get your t-shirt today, chatsports.com/FGB. And for good measure, just get the FGBs going in the chat. Okay, number 3, contract extensions. When you extend players, obviously it depends on structure. You could choose to take on more money in the short term, which maybe the Bears would actually do that since they are pretty cap-friendly right now. But you can also lower cap hits for this year. So 2 players I think the Bears could extend this offseason. I don't think they have a lot of guys they would extend. TJ Edwards could save you up to $3.5 million depending on how you structure the extension. And Kyler Gordon could save you just under $2 million. No, not earth-shattering money here, but 2 players I would like to keep beyond this year, especially Gordon coming off his rookie contract. He's got 1 year left, but I think Edwards has been your best linebacker, and he's been a bargain, so I would definitely give him probably a 2-year extension. Comfortable extending both. It would save you $5.4 million. And, hey, we're over $100 million, baby, with, I think, pretty reasonable moves, right? Like, we're not doing anything crazy here. Like, I didn't cut every player that would save you notable money. I kept DeMarcus Walker and Kevin Byard. I didn't restructure everybody. I only restructured Montez Sweat and Jaylon Johnson. So $101.1 million is where you sit. And then lastly, I think one that will be interesting. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for these discussions. But you could trade DeAndre Swift. Now, it takes 2 to tango. Is someone trading for Swift who has not a horrible contract but not a great one? I don't know. I think teams always need running backs, so I think you could get like a day 3 pick, I don't know, 5th, 6th round pick for DeAndre Swift. If they cut him, they don't save like any money, so I do not expect him to get cut. But if they decided, hey, we want to go in a different direction in our running back room, you save $6.7 million if a team does trade for him. That's you can find a starter with that money at a certain position. I still am not completely anti-DeAndre Swift. I do think he leaves yards on the table, but he also creates explosives, and I think there is value in that, especially if he's a part of a 1-2 punch, which is something I've talked about a lot this offseason. And I think more than that, too, if you trade DeAndre Swift, is Roschon Johnson ready for certainly not a lead role in my opinion, but even a number 2 role? I mean, maybe if your O-line's a lot better, he's a physical presence that can wear down a defense, but I don't think his skill set is that of a David Montgomery. I think he's more of just a short yardage utility back. To me, if you trade Swift, you probably need 2 running backs, unless you think Roschon and or Ian Wheeler is going to be someone who has a big role next year, and that feels like a stretch, especially with Wheeler, a UDFA, coming off an injury. Maybe they view Roschon in a higher light than I do. I'm not anti-Roschon. I haven't really seen it, and he's had concussion issues of his own. So I would expect him to stay Swift, and then next offseason you look at a trade or a cut depending on how he plays this year, because again, if you move on, I think you're going to have to add 2 backs, and that just creates an additional problem that you don't need. Okay, should the Bears trade DeAndre Swift? What say you? Type T for trade or K for keep. Get your votes in down in the comments section down below. And before we get out of here, the point of all this is the Bears have flexibility. I mentioned it off the top. Ryan Poles has done a good job. When he took the job over, there was a lot of bad contracts and dead cap money he had to take on. That's one thing he's done really well, is manage the books. Now, how aggressive do you want to be? And I do wonder, in a draft that isn't necessarily loaded at the top, would this be an offseason where maybe you're willing to restructure a couple of contracts, even to create bigger cap hits next year, to be a little more aggressive in free agency? Maybe you want to sign 2 high-priced offensive linemen. Like, who knows? Maybe they're looking at Trey Smith and a Ronnie Stanley or an Alaric Jackson, or maybe Drew Dahlman's price gets up there, but they really want him. So they absolutely have the flexibility. Don't let anyone tell you they can't. They already are north of $60 million. They could double that if they really wanted to. I don't think you need to get crazy with some of the moves, but I'd like to create up to 90, $100 million. I think that's very possible and reasonable with a couple of maneuvers here that we just went through. So we'll see how they approach it. Obviously, we're just under 4 weeks away from free agency, so we got you covered for that. My name is Harrison Graham. It's going to be a busy offseason, so subscribe to the channel. Share this video with your friends, and we'll see you next time.